clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m. when Merrick Ravenshaw smelled death. Not the quick death of a bullet or the slow death of disease. This was different. Chemical. Precise. The kind of death that turned lungs into concrete and blood into sludge. He stood motionless in Corridor B, the yellow mop bucket at his feet still dripping gray water onto the polished linoleum. The hallway stretched ahead of him like a tomb, fluorescent lights humming their endless electric prayer. Ravenshaw Station never slept. 300 souls lived and worked in this concrete maze carved into the Montana mountainside, and someone had to keep the floors clean while they did it. That someone was Merrick. He tilted his head, nostrils flaring. There it was again, faint but unmistakable. Bitter almonds mixed with the metallic tang of copper pennies left too long in a child's pocket. His hand moved to the wall, fingers splaying against the cold concrete as if the stone itself could confirm what his nose already knew. X-17. The chemical compound didn't officially exist. The files were classified above top secret, sealed behind acronyms that meant nothing to civilians and everything to the men who'd signed their lives away in blood and ink. But Merrick knew that smell the way a coal miner knows methane, the way a sailor knows storm wind. He'd been trained to know it. His eyes tracked the corridor, searching for the source. The overhead lights cast everything in that particular shade of institutional yellow-green that made healthy men look sick and sick men look dead. Door after door lined the walls, each marked with numbers and letters that told you nothing unless you had clearance. Lab A, Lab B, Lab C, Lab C. The smell was stronger there. Not a flood, not yet. Just a whisper. A promise of what was coming if someone didn't act. Merrick abandoned the mop bucket where it stood. The water would leave a stain on the floor. Someone would write him up for it in the morning. He didn't care. He was already moving his boots, making wet prints on the linoleum as he covered the 40 feet to Lab C in 8 long strides. The door was steel-painted the same institutional gray as every other door in the complex. A small window of reinforced glass sat at eye level, the kind that could stop a bullet but couldn't stop a man from seeing what lay beyond. Merrick looked through the glass. 3 bodies. They lay on the floor in positions that told a story. Dr. Alan Whitmore had made it almost to the emergency alarm, his hand outstretched toward the red button on the wall, fingers frozen 6 inches short of salvation. Doctor. Sarah Chen had collapsed at her workstation, face down on the keyboard, a string of meaningless letters still displayed on her computer screen. Robert Hayes, the young tech specialist everyone called Bobby, had tried to reach the door. He'd gotten close. Real close. His body lay crumpled against the steel, one hand still gripping the handle that wouldn't turn because the electromagnetic lock had engaged the moment the contamination sensors detected the leak. Sensors that should have triggered an alarm. Sensors that had somehow stayed silent. Merrick's jaw tightened. His hand went to the door handle, then stopped. Training from another life, a life he'd spent 5 years trying to forget, screamed at him from the back of his mind. Don't open it. Don't breach the seal. You'll contaminate the entire corridor. You'll kill everyone in this section. He pulled his hand back. His eyes tracked to the emergency panel beside the door. Every lab in Ravenshaw Station had one. Big red button, impossible to miss, designed to be hit even by men wearing level A hazmat suits, with gloves thick as winter mittens. Someone had covered it with duct tape, not carefully, not professionally, just 3 strips of silver tape forming an X across the button, the kind of quick job a man does when he wants something to look accidental but doesn't have time for art. Merrick's mind raced. The leak wasn't an accident. The covered alarm wasn't an accident. Someone had wanted Lab C to fill with X-17. Someone had wanted these 3 people to die quietly, without sirens, without evacuation, without anyone knowing until the morning shift found the bodies. But they hadn't counted on Merrick. They hadn't counted on a janitor who knew the smell of Soviet chemical weapons because he'd been trained to survive them in jungles and deserts, in places that didn't appear on any map the Pentagon would admit to owning. He turned from the door and ran. Not away, never away, toward the source. Corridor B terminated at a T-junction. Left led to the administrative wing, carpeted floors and desk lamps in filing cabinets full of secrets. Right led to the guts of the station, the mechanical spaces where pipes and ducts and cables carried the invisible infrastructure that kept 300 people alive under a mountain. Merrick went right. The smell grew stronger with each step. His lungs were already starting to tighten, the first whisper of bronchial constriction that came from breathing even trace amounts of X-17. He'd feel it for days after this, assuming he lived. A cough that wouldn't quit, a wheeze when he climbed stairs. the kind of damage that accumulated in the body like interest on a debt you could never quite pay off. He pushed through a heavy steel door marked authorized personnel only and entered the mechanical corridor. Here the institutional pretense fell away. No polished floors, no painted walls, just raw concrete and exposed pipes, some as thin as a finger, others wide enough to crawl through. They ran along the ceiling and walls like veins in a giant's arm, color-coded in yellows and reds and blues that meant something to the engineers who'd built them and nothing to anyone else. Except Merrick knew. Yellow meant water, red meant steam, blue meant compressed air, and green meant X-17. The pipe ran along the right wall, elevated 6 feet off the ground, secured to the concrete by metal brackets every 10 feet. It was only 4 inches in diameter, smaller than the water mains because you didn't need much X-17 to kill a lot of people. The compound was efficient, 2 parts per million in the air, and you'd start to feel it. 10 parts per million, and you'd be on your knees. 50 parts per million, and you'd be dead before you hit the ground. Merrick followed the pipe eyes, tracking along its length, looking for the break. The smell was overwhelming now, thick enough to taste. His throat burned, his eyes watered. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around to get to fresh air to save himself. He kept walking. 30 feet down the corridor, he found it. The valve. Every hazardous materials system in Ravenshaw Station had emergency shut-off valves spaced at regular intervals. Big things that cast iron wheels that required 2 hands and real muscle to turn. They were painted bright red and marked with stenciled letters that said, "Emergency shut-off" in white block capitals, impossible to miss, even in bad light. This valve was open. Not just open, deliberately opened. The wheel had been turned counterclockwise until it stopped, the handle pointing straight down like an accusation. And beneath it, where the pipe connected to the valve assembly, someone had loosened the compression fitting. Not enough to make it obvious. Not enough to cause an immediate catastrophic failure. Just enough to let the yay leak out in a slow, steady stream that would fill Lab C over the course of an hour while the rest of the station slept. Merrick grabbed the wheel with both hands. The metal was cold against his palms, slick with condensation from the temperature differential between the gas inside and the air outside. He turned clockwise. The wheel resisted the threads binding slightly, metal scraping against metal, with a sound like teeth grinding. He put his back into it. The wheel moved. 1 rotation. 2. 3. The sound of escaping gas, a high-pitched hiss like a snake's warning, began to fade. 4 rotations. 5. His arms trembled with effort, not from the weight, but from the knowledge of what would happen if he lost his grip now, if the valve spun back open, if the leak became a flood. 6 rotations. 7. The hiss stopped. Merrick held the wheel for another moment, making sure, feeling for any vibration that would indicate continued flow. Nothing. The pipe was silent, sealed. He let go and stepped back. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Someone had done this. Someone inside Ravenshaw Station had walked down this corridor, had opened this valve, had loosened this fitting, had killed 3 people, and would have killed more if Merrick hadn't been in the right place at the right time with the wrong kind of knowledge. He turned and ran back toward Lab C, not to open the door. Nothing could be done for the people inside. But the electromagnetic lock on the door could only be controlled from the security station, and whoever had sealed that door had done it remotely, which meant they had access to the system, which meant they had clearance, which meant they were still here, still in the station, still breathing the same air as everyone else. Merrick burst through the door into Corridor B. The mop bucket still sat where he'd left it, water spreading in a slow pool across the floor. He ran past it, boots splashing, heading for the security checkpoint at the end of the hall. He made it 20 feet before the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a brownout, the kind of instantaneous darkness that comes from someone throwing a breaker, cutting power to an entire section of the station in one deliberate motion. Merrick stopped running. He stood motionless in the black, controlling his breathing, listening. The mechanical hum of the ventilation system faded to silence. The fluorescent buzz of the lights died. All that remained was the sound of his own heartbeat and the distant groan of the mountains settling around them. And footsteps. Someone was running. Not toward him. Away. Fast. The kind of running a man does when he knows he's been discovered and the only thing left is escape. Merrick's hand went to his belt, a motion so automatic he didn't even think about it, reaching for the weapon that should have been there, the sidearm that every SEAL carried like a second skin. His fingers closed on empty air. He wasn't a SEAL anymore. Hadn't been for 5 years. Dishonorably discharged. Stripped of rank. Sent home with nothing but a duffel bag full of memories and a terminal case of guilt that no amount of whiskey could quite drown. Now he was just a janitor. But janitors don't stop chemical leaks. Janitors don't recognize Soviet weapons by smell. Janitors don't move through darkness like they own it muscle memory, guiding them along walls. They've only mopped 100 times feet, finding purchase on floors they could navigate blind. Merrick moved. He kept one hand on the wall, using it as a guide, letting his fingers trail across the concrete as he walked. The footsteps were getting fainter now, receding into the distance. He tried to track them to build a mental map of where the runner was going. Not toward the main entrance. That would mean passing through 3 security checkpoints, and whoever this was knew they'd never make it. Not toward the barracks. Too many witnesses, too many people who might wake up and wonder why someone was running through the halls at 4 in the morning. Toward the motor pool. The realization hit Merrick like cold water. The motor pool had a vehicle bay that opened directly to the outside, a massive rolling door that could be opened manually even without power. Get to a Jeep drive, out into the night, disappear into the Montana wilderness before anyone even knew to look. Merrick started running again. He knew this route. He'd walked it every night for 5 years, pushing a mop cart, emptying trash cans, being invisible, in the way that only the help can be invisible. 60 yards to the next intersection. Turn right, 40 yards to the stairs, down 2 flights, through the double doors, into the motor pool. He could make it. He had to make it. His boots hammered against the floor, the sound echoing off the walls in the darkness. His breath came hard and fast, not from exertion, but from the X-17 he'd breathed, the damage already spreading through his lungs, like cracks in ice. He'd pay for this, later. Assuming there was a later, he hit the stairs at full speed and nearly fell. His boot caught the edge of the first step wrong. His knee buckled, and for one terrible moment, he was pitching forward into empty space with nothing but concrete and darkness ahead. His hand shot out, caught the railing, jerked him back into balance. Pain flared through his shoulder, old injury, protesting new abuse, but he didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Down the stairs, through the doors, into the cavernous space of the motor pool. Emergency lights kicked in here, battery-powered backups that cast a dim red glow across the rows of vehicles. Jeeps and trucks and one ancient deuce and a half that looked like it had survived the Second World War through sheer stubbornness. The air smelled of motor oil and tire rubber, and cold. And there at the far end of the bay, silhouetted against the massive rolling door, stood a man. He had his hand on the manual release chain, ready to pull, ready to open the door and vanish into the night. He froze when he saw Merrick. The two of them locked in that peculiar moment of recognition when hunted becomes hunter, and hunter becomes hunted, and no one's quite sure which is which. The man was wearing fatigues. Standard issue. Could be anyone. Could be any of the 300 people who called Ravenshaw Station home. Except Merrick knew him, Sergeant Hollis Crane. Quartermaster. 15 years in the Army. Married. 2 kids. The kind of man who smiled when he handed you your supply requisition, who remembered birthdays, who organized the Christmas party every year and made sure everyone got a present. The kind of man you'd never suspect of murder. Crane's hand moved, not toward the door chain, toward his belt, toward the sidearm that janitors didn't carry, but sergeants did. Merrick dove. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space, a thunderclap that turned the motor pool into a bell, and both men into the clappers inside. The bullet went high, sparking off the ceiling, ricocheting with a whine that Dopplered away into silence. Merrick hit the ground rolling, came up behind a Jeep, put steel between himself and Crane. His heart hammered against his ribs. His lungs burned. Every cell in his body screamed for oxygen that wouldn't come. Not enough, not anymore. Ravenshaw, Crane's voice echoed off the walls. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Merrick didn't answer. Talking was for people with leverage. He had none. No weapon, no backup, no authority, just knowledge and rage and the stubborn refusal to let 3 people die without someone answering for it. He moved. Quiet, low. Using the vehicles as cover, working his way along the line toward the tool racks on the wall. If he could get a weapon, any weapon, something to even the odds. Another shot. This one punched through the Jeep's door panel 6 inches from his head, the bullet passing through sheet metal like it was paper. Crane was shooting blind, trying to flush him out. You don't understand what's happening here, Crane shouted. This is bigger than you, bigger than those 3 scientists. This is about the future. Merrick reached the tool rack. His hand closed around a tire iron, 2 feet of solid steel, with a satisfying weight. Not a gun, but better than nothing. They were going to weaponize it. Crane was still talking, his voice taking on that desperate edge of a man trying to justify the unjustifiable. X-17 was supposed to be defensive, a deterrent, but Whitmore and Chen, they figured out how to make it airborne, how to deliver it with artillery shells, how to turn it into something that could wipe out entire cities. Merrick moved again, circling, putting another vehicle between them. His eyes tracked the shadows looking for Crane's position. There, near the door, still between Merrick and escape. I couldn't let them do it. Crane's voice cracked. I couldn't let America become the nation that gasses civilians. So I made a choice. I stopped them. And yeah, it cost 3 lives, but how many lives did I save? Hundreds. Thousands. Merrick stepped out from behind the truck. Crane spun gun coming up, but Merrick was already moving. The tire iron left his hand in a flat spin, tumbling end over end across the 30 feet between them. It caught Crane in the shoulder, not the head like Merrick had aimed for, but close enough. The gun went flying, clattering across the concrete floor. Both men dove for it. Crane got there first. His fingers closed around the grip just as Merrick crashed into him, driving him back into the wall with an impact that knocked the air from both their lungs. The gun swung up. Merrick grabbed Crane's wrist with both hands, forcing the barrel away anywhere but at him. They struggled. Crane was younger, maybe 45, still had the strength of a man in his prime. But Merrick had been trained by people who understood that combat wasn't about strength. It was about leverage, about finding the joints and angles where force multiplied, where a smaller man could break a larger one if he knew where to press. Merrick drove his knee into Crane's thigh, targeting the nerve cluster on the inside of the leg. Crane's leg buckled. Merrick twisted, using Crane's own momentum against him, and suddenly they were both falling, tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs and desperation. The gun went off. The bullet punched through the motor pool's wall, through 6 inches of concrete and rebar out into the Montana night. The muzzle flash lit their faces for a fraction of a second, close enough that Merrick could see the fear in Crane's eyes, the knowledge that this wasn't going to end the way he'd planned. Merrick twisted the gun free. It was easier than it should have been. Crane's grip had weakened, his right hand suddenly useless, and it took Merrick a half second to realize why. Blood, Crane's shoulder, where the tire iron had hit. The impact had done more damage than Merrick realized, maybe broken the clavicle, maybe torn something important. Crane's entire right side was compromised. Merrick stood. He kept the gun pointed at Crane, but his hands were steady. Training muscle memory, the part of him that would always be a SEAL no matter what the discharge papers said. Crane looked up at him from the floor. You going to shoot me, Ravenshaw? Going to execute an unarmed man? Thought you were better than that. I'm better than that, Merrick said quietly. That's why you're going to live long enough to stand trial. He stepped back, maintaining distance, keeping the gun steady. His free hand reached for the radio clipped to his belt. Not his radio. The radio he'd taken from the security desk when he'd run past it. The one that connected to the whole station. He keyed the mic. This is Merrick Ravenshaw in the motor pool. I have a code red situation. We've had a chemical leak in Lab C, 3 confirmed casualties and 1 suspect in custody. I need medical, I need security, and I need Colonel Wolf down here right now. Static, then a voice crackling through the speaker. Ravenshaw, the hell are you doing on this channel? Saving lives, sir, Merrick said. Same as always. He kept the gun on Crane, kept his breathing steady, kept the rage locked down in the box where he'd learned to keep it, the place where all the anger and guilt and grief lived the price of being a man who'd killed his best friend and spent 5 years trying to make it mean something. Footsteps. Running. Lots of them. The station was waking up, 300 people spilling into the corridors, drawn by the gunshots and the radio call and the fundamental human instinct that says, when something goes wrong, you move toward it, not away. The motor pool doors burst open. MPS first, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the red emergency lighting. Then medics with their bags and stretchers. Then Colonel Harrison Wolf, 55 years old and ramrod straight, a man who'd hit Omaha Beach at 19 and never quite left the war behind. Wolf took in the scene with one sweep. Merrick standing there with the gun, Crane bleeding on the floor, the bullet holes in the wall and ceiling. His face didn't change, didn't register surprise or shock, or anything at all. Lower the weapon, Ravenshaw, Wolf said quietly. Merrick did. He set the gun on the hood of the nearest Jeep, hands moving slow and careful, the way you move when you're surrounded by men with loaded weapons and hair triggers. Sir, Merrick said, Lab C is contaminated, X-17 leak. 3 dead. Sergeant Crane sabotaged the emergency valve in the mechanical corridor. I sealed it, but the lab is still hot. We need a hazmat team. Wolf's eyes narrowed. How do you know about X-17? Because I used to be someone else, sir. They stared at each other across the motor pool, colonel and janitor, officer and enlisted, the man who gave orders and the man who mopped floors. But in that moment, something passed between them, some recognition that went deeper than rank or station or the 5 years Merrick had spent trying to disappear. Get him out of here, Wolf said, gesturing to Crane. Medical bay under guard. No one talks to him without my authorization. He turned to Merrick. You, with me. Now. Two MPS grabbed Crane, hauled him to his feet, started walking him toward the exit. Crane twisted in their grip, looked back at Merrick. You don't understand, Crane said. You think you're a hero, but you just saved the weapon. You just made sure it gets built. The blood of everyone it kills is on your hands now. Merrick didn't answer. He followed Colonel Wolf out of the motor pool through the corridors past the growing crowd of confused and frightened people who'd been woken by sirens and gunshots and the creeping knowledge that something terrible had happened in the mountain tonight. They walked in silence until they reached Wolf's office. The colonel opened the door, gestured Merrick inside, closed it behind them. The office was Spartan. A desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets. A wall of commendations and photographs that told the story of a life spent in service. Wolf sat behind his desk. Didn't tell Merrick to sit, just looked at him. Really looked the way you look at a puzzle you can't quite solve. Your file says you were discharged in 1978, Wolf said finally. Friendly fire incident. Nicaragua, classified operation. 1 casualty, Petty Officer Garrett Kane. Your spotter. Yes, sir. Your file says it was an accident. Wrong target. Bad intel. Fog of war. Yes, sir. Your file is lying. Merrick said nothing. Wolf opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. Classified stamps covered the front. He opened it, turned it around so Merrick could see. Photographs, black and white, grainy, taken at night with long lenses. A jungle clearing. 2 men moving through the darkness. One of them was Merrick, 20 years younger, 20 pounds lighter, with the kind of lean hardness that came from living on nothing but adrenaline and hate. The other was Garrett Kane, his best friend since boot camp, the man who'd saved Merrick's life in Beirut and Manila, and a dozen other places that didn't officially exist. The next photo showed Garrett on the ground, Merrick standing over him, a gun in Merrick's hand. Friendly fire, Wolf said quietly, is what we called it when we didn't want to admit that one of our best operators had a mental break and shot his own teammate. It wasn't like that, Merrick said. Then what was it like? Merrick closed his eyes, saw it again, would always see it, the clearing, the darkness. The way Garrett had turned at the wrong moment, moved into the wrong shadow, and for one terrible instant looked exactly like the target they'd been hunting for 6 months. One instant, one mistake, one bullet. I thought he was someone else, Merrick said. By the time I realized it was too late. And they gave you a dishonorable discharge instead of a court-martial because the operation was classified and a trial would have exposed things the Pentagon didn't want exposed. Yes, sir. Wolf closed the folder, set it aside, looked at Merrick with something that might have been sympathy or might have been calculation or might have been both. Why are you here, Ravenshaw? Why Montana? Why a janitor job at a classified military installation? Because I needed to disappear, sir. And because I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, kept my head down, helped people without them knowing I was helping, I could make up for what I did. You can't make up for killing a man. I know, sir, but I have to treat. Wolf stood, walked to the window, looked out at the mountain at the snow that had started falling, covering the world in white like a shroud. 3 scientists are dead, he said. Sergeant Crane will be court-martialed. There will be an investigation. Inspector General, J. AG, probably CIA, they're going to want to know how a janitor knew about chemical weapons, how he recognized X-17 by smell, how he had the training to shut down a hazardous material leak without killing himself. I understand, sir. They're going to dig into your past, pull the file, find out who you really are. I know. Wolf turned back to face him. Or we could skip all that. You could tell me right now who you were, what you did, why I should trust you. Merrick met his eyes. Lieutenant Commander Merrick Ravenshaw, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, SEAL Team 6, Chemical Warfare Specialist, 63 combat missions across 4 continents. Trained to survive everything from sarin to VX to Soviet nerve agents we didn't even have names for. Honorably discharged would have been the truth if Garrett Kane hadn't died. Instead, I got dishonorably discharged, lost my pension, lost my career, lost everything except the knowledge that I was really good at staying alive in places where everyone else died. And now you're a janitor. Now I'm a man who stopped a chemical leak that would have killed half this base if I'd been anyone else. Wolf smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. You know what the worst part is, Ravenshaw? You're right, Crane opened that valve at 2 a.m. By the time we would have found it through normal channels at shift change around 7 a.m., the whole ventilation system would have been contaminated. We'd have had 50 dead, maybe more. But you were there at 3:47 in the morning. Right place, right time, right skill set. Almost like someone arranged it. Sir, Crane didn't know you'd be in that corridor. No one did. You switch up your cleaning route every night, never follow a pattern. Old tradecraft, I'm guessing. Make yourself a hard target, but that means Crane couldn't have planned around you. He opened that valve expecting the leak to go unnoticed until morning. He didn't count on a janitor who could smell death at 20 paces. Merrick said nothing. So I'm asking myself, Wolf continued, what kind of man ends up in exactly the right place at exactly the right time with exactly the right training to stop a terrorist attack on a classified military installation? A lucky man, sir. Or a man someone put there on purpose. The words hung in the air between them. Merrick felt his pulse quicken, felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came from being interrogated by someone who knew what they were doing. I'm not a plant, Merrick said. I'm not CIA. I'm not working for anyone except the people who hired me to mop floors. Then how did you know about Lab C? How did you know which valve to close? How did you know where Crane would run? Because I'm good at what I do, sir, or what I used to do. The skills don't go away just because the job does. Wolf studied him for a long moment, then nodded once sharp and final. You're confined to quarters until further notice. MPS will escort you. You'll be debriefed by intelligence officers. Your story will be verified. And if I find out you're lying to me, Ravenshaw, if I find out you're part of this somehow, I will personally make sure you spend the rest of your life in Leavenworth breaking rocks with the other traders. Understood, sir. But if you're telling the truth, Wolf continued, his voice softening slightly, if you really are just a janitor who happened to have the right background at the right moment, then we need to talk about what happens next. Sir Brown, you sealed a chemical weapons leak with your bare hands. You subdued an armed suspect without backup. You saved this installation and everyone in it. That doesn't sound like a janitor to me. That sounds like a soldier. Merrick shook his head. I'm not a soldier anymore, sir. I lost that right when I killed Garrett Kane. Maybe, Wolf said. Or maybe you've spent 5 years punishing yourself for one mistake. And tonight you proved that underneath all that guilt, you're still the man who completed 63 missions and came home alive. 3 scientists didn't come home tonight, sir. No, they didn't, and that's on Crane, not on you. You didn't pull that trigger. You didn't open that valve. You stopped it from being worse. That matters, Ravenshaw. That counts for something. 2 MPS appeared at the door. Young men, alert, hands resting on their sidearms. Ready for trouble. Escort Mr. Ravenshaw to the guest quarters, Wolf said. Make him comfortable. He's not under arrest, but he's not free to leave until we sort this out. The MPs nodded. Merrick followed them out into the corridor. The station was chaos now. People running everywhere, sirens wailing, the steady mechanical voice of the emergency announcement system repeating the same message over and over. All personnel report to designated assembly areas. This is not a drill. They walked past Lab C. The door was sealed now with bright yellow tape, the kind that screamed hazmat in letters big enough to read from 100 yards. Through the window, Merrick could see shapes moving in full containment suits, collecting evidence documenting the dead. He forced himself to look away. The guest quarters turned out to be a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the mountain valley. Snow falling heavier now, turning the world into a white void. The MPS positioned themselves outside the door. Not quite guards, not quite jailers, something in between. Merrick sat on the bed. His hands were shaking, again, delayed reaction setting an adrenaline crash, hitting like a truck. His shoulder ached where he'd caught himself on the stairs. His lungs burned from the X-17. His head pounded from the stress and the fear and the creeping knowledge that nothing in his life would ever be simple again. He'd spent 5 years disappearing, 5 years being nobody, 5 years mopping floors and emptying trash and keeping his mouth shut. One night had undone all of it. He lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling, thought about Garrett Kane, about the way his friend had looked at him in that jungle clearing, confusion turning to understanding, turning to forgiveness in the 3 seconds it took him to die. I'm sorry, Merrick whispered to the empty room. I'm so goddamn sorry. No one answered. Outside the window, snow continued to fall, burying the world in silence. Morning came without sleep. Merrick watched the darkness fade through the window, watched the snow turn from black to gray to white as the sun climbed somewhere beyond the storm clouds. The Montana winter didn't care about chemical leaks or dead scientists or men who'd killed their best friends. It just kept snowing steady and relentless, the way it had snowed for 1 million years before Ravenshore Station existed and would snow for 1 million years after. At 8 o'clock, the door opened. Colonel Wolfe stood in the frame, 2 paper coffee cups in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His uniform was crisp, perfectly pressed, but his eyes carried the weight of a night spent making calls to Washington, explaining how 3 of his scientists had died on his watch. "Walk with me," Wolfe said. It wasn't a request. Merrick stood, took one of the coffee cups. The heat felt good against his palm, grounding him in the physical world and pulling him back from the places his mind had wandered during the dark hours. They walked, not toward the administrative wing or the labs or anywhere official. Toward the east observation deck, a concrete platform that jutted from the mountainside like a ship's prow, offering a view of the valley below. In summer, you could see for 50 miles. In winter, in a storm like this, you could barely see 50 feet. Wolfe leaned against the railing. Snowflakes caught in his gray hair melted ran down his collar. He didn't seem to notice. "I made some calls last night," Wolfe said. "Talked to people who knew you, old commanders, team members. Even pulled your psyche eval from after the Kane incident." Merrick said nothing, just waited. "You know what I learned," Wolfe continued, "that Garrett Kane's death broke something in you. The psychiatrist wrote that you showed signs of severe PTSD, survivor's guilt, suicidal ideation. Recommended you be committed for observation, but the Navy needed you gone more than they needed you healthy, so they gave you the discharge papers and a bus ticket and told you to disappear." "I'm aware, sir." "The file also says Kane's last words were, 'It's okay, Raven. You didn't know.'" Wolfe turned to look at him. "That true, yes, sir. He forgave you, on the spot. Dying on a jungle floor with a bullet in his chest, and he used his last breath to tell you it wasn't your fault. Doesn't make it not my fault, sir." "No," Wolfe agreed, "it doesn't. But it means Kane thought you were worth saving, even at the end, especially at the end." The wind picked up, driving snow horizontal across the observation deck. Merrick pulled his jacket tighter. The cold didn't bother him. He'd trained in conditions that made Montana winter look like spring vacation. But the memories did. They always did. "Why am I here, sir?" Merrick asked. "If you're going to throw me in the brig, just do it. If you're going to ship me back to civilian life, I can be packed in 10 minutes. "You're here because I need to know something," Wolfe said. "Last night you told me you came to Montana to disappear, to make up for what you did. But I don't buy it. Sir, men who want to disappear go to Alaska. They go to the oil fields or the fishing boats or the middle of nowhere. They don't apply for jobs at classified military installations. They don't put themselves in positions where their past might be discovered." Wolfe's eyes bored into him. "So I'm asking you straight, Ravenshaw, why are you really here?" Merrick looked out at the snow, thought about lying, thought about telling Wolfe what he wanted to hear. But 5 years of mopping floors had taught him something. Lies required energy, required maintenance, required you to remember what you'd said to whom and when. The truth was simpler. "Because I heard you were working on chemical weapons," Merrick said, "and I thought maybe if I was close to them, I could make sure what happened to Garrett never happened to anyone else. You came here to spy on us. I came here to help, sir, in the only way I knew how." Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, not a happy sound. The kind of laugh a man makes when the universe reveals a joke he should have seen coming. "You know what the worst part is?" Wolfe said. "You were right. Someone did need to be watching. Crane had been here for 3 years. 3 years of skimming supplies, falsifying records, laying groundwork. And no one caught him until you smelled gas in a hallway at 4 in the morning. Sir, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "The emergency alarm in Lab C, someone covered it with duct tape. That means Crane had to access the lab before the leak, had to know the scientists would be working late, had to have inside knowledge of their schedule. And that means he had help. Someone who knew the rotation, someone who could turn off the electromagnetic locks remotely, someone with command-level access." Wolfe's face went very still. "You're suggesting there's another mole." "I'm suggesting 3 scientists don't die from a coincidental leak on the one night they are all working late unless someone coordinated it." The colonel turned away from the railing, began walking back toward the entrance. Merrick followed. They passed through the blast door, descended stairs that spiraled down into the mountain's belly. Security checkpoints, retinal scanners, armed guards who saluted Wolfe and eyed Merrick with undisguised suspicion. They stopped at an unmarked door. Wolfe pressed his thumb to a biometric reader. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was an interrogation room. Not the kind they showed in movies. No two-way mirror, no recording equipment visible. Just a steel table bolted to the floor, two chairs and walls painted that particular shade of beige that made you understand why solitary confinement drove men mad. Sit, Wolf said. Merrick sat. Wolf remained standing. He pulled a file from under his arm, dropped it on the table. The impact was louder than it should have been, metal on metal final as a coffin closing. This is the official record of what happened last night, Wolf said. According to this report, Sergeant Hollis Crane, overcome by political ideology and mental illness, sabotaged Lab C in a misguided attempt to destroy the X-17 project. He acted alone. No accomplices, no conspiracy, just one troubled man making a terrible choice. That's not what happened. No, Wolf agreed, it's not. But it's what's going to happen unless you convince me otherwise. Because right now, Ravenshaw, you're the only person saying there's more to this story. Crane isn't talking. The MPs didn't find anything in his quarters except $50,000 in cash and a one-way ticket to Mexico City. And the CIA is very interested in making this go away quietly. Why? Because X-17 isn't just a defensive weapon. It's leverage. The kind of leverage that keeps the Soviets from getting too ambitious in Europe or the Middle East or anywhere else they think about expanding. If word gets out that our security is compromised, that we can't protect our own research, then the whole program gets shut down and we lose our advantage. Merrick leaned back in his chair. So 3 dead scientists get swept under the rug. Forgotten. Turned into a footnote in a classified file no one will ever read. Unless you can prove there's more to it. How, sir, I'm a janitor. No clearance, no authority, no access to anything except mop buckets and industrial cleaner. Wolf smiled. It was not a kind expression. You were a janitor. As of 0600 this morning, you're something else. He pulled a second folder from inside his jacket. This one was thinner, newer. He slid it across the table. Merrick opened it. Inside was a security badge, his photo, his name. And underneath, in block capitals, security consultant, level 3 clearance. What is this your new job? Wolf said. I told Washington we needed an independent investigator. Someone with the skills to find what we're missing, but without the political baggage of being active military. Someone who understands chemical weapons and special operations and how to think like the enemy. They approved this. They approved 48 hours. After that, you turn in the badge and go back to being nobody. But for the next 2 days, you have access to everything except the director's private files. You can interview anyone, review any document, go anywhere in this facility. Why? Because I don't like loose ends, Ravenshaw, and because 3 scientists I was responsible for are dead. If there's someone else in my command who helped kill them, I want to know. And I want them to face justice. Merrick looked at the badge. At his own face, staring back at him, frozen in that particular expression, security photos always captured halfway between defiance and resignation. If I find something, Merrick said slowly, if I prove there's a conspiracy, what happens? Then we prosecute, publicly if possible, quietly if necessary, but either way someone pays. And if I don't find anything, then Crane was a lone wolf and you go back to mopping floors. Wolf paused. Or you don't. I have friends in other places. People who could use someone with your particular skill set. CIA, DEA, even private sector. The world needs men who can smell death before it arrives. I'm done with that life. Are you dying? Wolf gestured at the badge. Because you picked it up pretty quick for a man who's done. Before Merrick could respond, the door opened. A woman entered carrying a thick file folder. Colonel Wolf, she said, Captain Victoria Blackwood, CIA. She didn't wait for introduction, pulled out a chair across from Merrick. Mr. Ravenshaw, your 48 hours started 3 hours ago. You've spent most of it sleeping. Not very productive. Wolf's jaw tightened. Captain, this is a DOD investigation, with a CIA asset at its center. Blackwood opened the folder. X-17 represents 18 months of research and $43 million in funding. When 3 scientists die in a sabotage, that becomes my concern. She slid a photograph across the table. Recognize him. Merrick looked. A man, mid-20s, dark hair, electronics insignia on his uniform. No. Specialist Raymond Hale, maintenance tech. He disabled the Lab C camera 2 weeks before the leak, assigned by Sergeant Crane. She slid another photo. He's been AWOL since yesterday morning. Interesting timing. You think Hale was part of it? Merrick said. I think this conspiracy is bigger than one quartermaster with a conscience. Blackwood's eyes locked on his. The question is how big, and more importantly, who benefits from exposing it versus burying it. 3 dead scientists, Merrick said. Whatever Crane's motivations, he committed murder. Multiple counts on a federal installation. And yet, Blackwood said, pulling a tablet from her briefcase, his story checks out. Dr. Whitmore and Dr. Chen were working on delivery mechanisms, artillery shells, aerial dispersal, ways to deploy X-17 over large population centers. Crane found documentation, emails between the scientists and Pentagon officials discussing tactical applications. She turned the tablet around. On the screen was an email chain. Merrick recognized Whitmore's name in the sender field. The subject line read X-17 offensive capabilities, preliminary assessment. This doesn't justify murder, Merrick said. No, Blackwood agreed, but it complicates the narrative. Crane didn't kill to serve a foreign power. He killed to stop what he saw as an American atrocity in the making. There are no innocent people in weapons development, Blackwood continued, only degrees of complicity. Wolf stood abruptly. This interview is over. Captain Blackwood, you can observe the investigation, but you don't get to run it. Ravenshaw works for me. He reports to me. Blackwood stood as well. The agency has jurisdiction over all matters involving classified weapons programs, Colonel. I'm here as a courtesy. Don't make me turn it into a mandate. Try it. See what happens when I call the Pentagon and explain that CIA is interfering with a DoD murder investigation. They stared at each other across the table. 2 people who'd spent careers navigating bureaucratic warfare, each knowing exactly how far they could push before the other pushed back. Blackwood broke first. Fine. Ravenshaw has 48 hours. But I'm watching. She looked at Merrick. Don't disappoint me, Ravenshaw. The CIA doesn't like loose ends any more than Colonel Wolf does. Find the truth, whatever it is, wherever it leads. She left. The door closed behind her with a sound like a cell locking. Wolf exhaled slowly. Well, that was fun. She knows something, Merrick said, about the conspiracy, about who helped Crane. She's not here to observe. She's here to control the narrative. Maybe, or maybe she's exactly what she appears to be, an agency officer protecting her program. Wolf picked up the security badge, held it out. Either way, you've got 48 hours, starting now. Where do you begin? Merrick took the badge, clipped it to his belt. Where I always begin, with the bodies. The morgue was in the basement. 3 levels down past security checkpoints and blast doors in a space carved from solid rock that stayed cold year-round without need for refrigeration. The mountain itself was a tomb. The morgue just made it official. Dr. Sarah Chen. Dr. Alan Whitmore and Robert Hayes lay on steel tables under white sheets. The medical examiner, a tired-looking Army captain named Reeves, stood beside them with a clipboard and the expression of a man who'd seen too much death to be surprised by it anymore. Chemical asphyxiation, Reeves said, pulling back the first sheet to reveal Dr. Whitmore's face. X-17 works by binding to hemoglobin more efficiently than oxygen. The victim suffocates even though they're breathing. It's not a pleasant death. Merrick studied Whitmore's face. The man had been 42, married, 3 kids according to the personnel file Merrick had reviewed on the walk down. His eyes were still open, fixed on something only he could see, pupils dilated from the final moments of oxygen starvation. How long did they suffer, Merrick asked. Based on the concentration we measured in Lab C, 3 to 5 minutes from first exposure to unconsciousness. Another 2 minutes until cardiac arrest. They knew they were dying, if that's what you're asking. Did they try to escape? Reeves nodded, moved to the second body, Dr. Sarah Chen. She'd been found at her workstation, face down on the keyboard. Chen tried to send an email. We recovered it from her computer. Just 3 words: help, gas, Crane. She knew it was Crane. She saw him, or suspected him. The timestamp on the email was 3:52 a.m., 5 minutes after the leak started. She must have realized what was happening, tried to warn someone. But the electromagnetic lock prevented her from leaving. Yes. And the covered emergency alarm meant she couldn't trigger evacuation. She was trapped. They all were. Merrick moved to the third body. Robert Hayes, 29 years old, engaged to be married. He died reaching for the door, fingers still curled around the handle. This one fought longest, Reeves said quietly. Made it all the way to the exit, but the door wouldn't open. The lock engaged at 3:48 a.m. before the leak even started. Someone locked them in before releasing the gas. On premeditation, without question. Merrick walked the length of the morgue processing. 3 people, Three different reactions to approaching death. Whitmore went for the alarm, Chen went for communication, Hayes went for escape. All three failed because someone had planned it that way. The electromagnetic lock, Merrick said. Who has the authority to engage it? Reeves consulted his clipboard. Command staff, Colonel Wolfe, Major Brennan, Major. Sergeant Crane in his capacity as quartermaster. And anyone with security override codes, which includes about a dozen people. Can you trace who activated it? Already did. The security logs show the lock was triggered by Crane's access code at 3:48 a.m. He was logged into the system from the security station in Building 3. Where were the security guards who should have been manning that station? Coffee break, both of them, left the station unattended for 15 minutes. Crane logged in engaged, the lock logged out. By the time the guards returned, he was gone. Merrick thought about that. Awfully convenient. Two guards taking a break at the exact moment Crane needs access to the security system. You think they were in on it? I think someone made sure they wouldn't be there. He pulled out his phone, the secure device Wolf had issued him, along with the security badge, pulled up the personnel files for the two guards on duty last night. Corporal James Mitchell, Private First Class David Torres. Both had exemplary records. Both had been at Ravensshore Station for less than 6 months. Both had been assigned to night shift security by Major Lyle Brennan. Merrick made a note on his phone. Then he turned back to the bodies, studying them one more time, looking for something, anything, the detail that didn't fit the evidence that everyone else had missed. His eyes caught on Dr. Chen's hands. Her fingernails, Merrick said. They're damaged, broken. Reeves came closer, examined Chen's hands. You're right. I noted that in my initial examination, but attributed it to death throes. Victims of asphyxiation often claw at their throats, their faces. The autonomous nervous system's final attempt to restore breathing. But her hands were on the keyboard, typing the email. She wouldn't have been clawing at her throat. Merrick bent down, looking closer. The nail on Chen's right index finger was broken below the quick. Fresh blood had pooled beneath it, dried now, dark as old rust. She was digging at something, Merrick said, before the email, before the gas reached fatal concentration. What was she trying to do? Reeves shook his head. The autopsy didn't reveal anything unusual. No foreign objects, no wounds except the damaged nails. Can I see her workstation, the one where she died? Lab C is still sealed. Hazmat hasn't cleared it yet. Then get me a hazmat suit. I need to see that room. 20 minutes later, Merrick stood in the anteroom outside Lab C being helped into a Level A containment suit by a technician who looked barely old enough to vote. The suit was heavy, cumbersome, the kind of thing you trained in for hours before you trusted it with your life. But Merrick had worn suits like this before in places where the air itself was a weapon. The technician checked the seals, verified the oxygen flow, gave him a thumbs up. Merrick opened the door. Lab C looked exactly like it had through the window last night, except emptier somehow. More final. The bodies were gone, removed to the morgue, but their shadows remained. Whitmore's position marked with tape on the floor, Chen's keyboard still displaying her final message. Hayes at the door, forever reaching. Merrick moved carefully, each step deliberate. The suit limited his mobility, his peripheral vision, his ability to sense the environment. But it kept him alive, and right now that seemed like a reasonable trade. He went to Chen's workstation first. The desk was standard government issue. Metal, 3 drawers on the right, computer monitor, keyboard, mouse. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. Except, the bottom right corner of the desk had scratch marks, fresh ones. Wood grain torn away in parallel lines exactly the width of human fingernails. Merrick knelt, looked closer. The scratches weren't random. They formed a pattern. 3 distinct marks, each about 2 inches long, carved into the wood with desperate strength. Someone had tried to write something. He pulled out his phone, took photos, enhanced the image, played with the contrast until the scratches stood out clear. 3 letters. B-R-E. Chen knew, Merrick said aloud, his voice muffled by the suit's helmet. She knew who helped Crane. She tried to leave a message. B-R-E. Not a complete word, not a name, not exactly. But enough for someone who knew what to look for. Major Lyle Brennan. Merrick stood, his pulse hammered in his ears, competing with the hiss of his oxygen supply. Brennan was Wolf's second in command, the man who assigned guard rotations, the man who could ensure 2 security guards took a coffee break at precisely the right moment, the man who had command-level access to every system in Ravensshore Station. He had to tell Wolf, had to. His radio crackled. Ravenshaw, this is Colonel Wolfe. Return to my office immediately. We have a situation. Merrick's blood went cold. Sir, I've found evidence. Not over the radio. Get up here, now. The channel went dead. Merrick moved toward the exit, but something made him stop. Some instinct born of 63 combat missions, the voice in his head that had kept him alive when smarter men died. If Brennan was the mole, if he'd helped Crane kill 3 scientists, then he knew Merrick was investigating. Knew Merrick would eventually find evidence. And if Brennan had command access, he could track Merrick's movements through the base. Could know exactly where Merrick was at any given moment. Could arrange an accident. Merrick sealed the lab door behind him, stripped off the hazmat suit, clipped his security badge to his belt, but didn't activate it. If the badge had a tracker, and it almost certainly did, he didn't want Brennan knowing where he was going. He took the maintenance corridors, the paths he'd learned over 5 years of mopping floors. Routes that didn't appear on official maps, spaces between the official spaces where janitors and technicians moved invisibly through the installation's guts. It took him 20 minutes to reach Wolf's office. He came up through a service elevator, emerged in a corridor 2 doors down from the colonel's office, and stopped. The door to Wolf's office was open, not unusual by itself, but Wolf never left his door open when he was inside, never left himself exposed to interruption or observation. Merrick drew no weapon because he had no weapon, just his hands and his training and the certain knowledge that something was wrong. He moved to the doorframe, looked inside. Wolf sat at his desk, very still, too still. His face was gray lips, slightly blue eyes fixed on the middle distance. On the desk in front of him sat a coffee cup, still steaming. Merrick entered the room, checked Wolf's pulse. Weak, thready, breathing shallow, classic signs of poisoning. Something in the coffee. "Colonel," Merrick said, gripping Wolf's shoulder. "Can you hear me?" Wolf's eyes moved, focused on Merrick with effort. His lips moved. No sound came out. He tried again. "Bren? Nan?" Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed forward onto the desk. Merrick grabbed the phone, dialed medical. "This is Ravenshaw. I need an emergency medical team to Colonel Wolf's office. Possible poisoning. Officer down." He set the phone down without waiting for a response. Pulled Wolf from the chair, laid him on the floor, checked his airway. Still breathing, still alive, but barely. Footsteps in the corridor. Running. Merrick looked up, expecting medics. Major Lyle Brennan stood in the doorway. He looked at Wolf on the floor, at Merrick kneeling beside him, at the coffee cup on the desk, and he smiled. "Well," Brennan said quietly, "this is unfortunate." His hand moved to his sidearm. Merrick was already moving, not toward Brennan, toward the desk. He grabbed the coffee cup, hurled it at Brennan's face. Hot liquid sprayed. Brennan flinched, hands coming up instinctively to protect his eyes. Merrick hit him low and hard, driving his shoulder into Brennan's midsection, carrying them both out into the corridor. They crashed into the opposite wall, hard enough to crack the drywall. Brennan's gun clattered to the floor. Both men lunged for it. Merrick got there first. His fingers closed around the grip. He rolled, came up, aiming. Brennan was gone. Running, down the corridor toward the east wing, toward the mechanical spaces, toward the place where this had all started. Merrick hesitated for only a heartbeat. Wolf was dying on the office floor. The medics would arrive any second. Brennan was escaping. If he got away, if he disappeared into the mountain's guts, they'd never prove the conspiracy. Crane would take the fall alone, Brennan would vanish. The decision took less than a second. Merrick ran after Brennan. Behind him, he heard voices. Medics arriving, someone shouting orders. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. This ended now, one way or another. The corridor blurred past. Emergency lights cast everything in red. Somewhere an alarm began to sound, the steady mechanical shriek that meant the base was going into lockdown. Ahead, Brennan burst through a door. Merrick followed. They were in the mechanical spaces now, the same corridors where Merrick had stopped the X-17 leak 12 hours ago. Pipes overhead, concrete underfoot. The mountain's bones laid bare. Brennan turned left, right, left again. He knew these spaces too. Knew them well enough to navigate at a run. He was leading Merrick somewhere. The realization came too late. Brennan rounded a corner. Merrick followed and stopped. Dead end. A utility closet. Mops, buckets, chemical supplies. Nowhere to run. Brennan stood at the far end, back against the wall, breathing hard. And in his hand, raised and ready, was a canister. X-17. "Don't," Merrick said. "Brennan, don't do this." "You should have stayed a janitor," Brennan said. "Should have kept mopping floors and kept your mouth shut. Now you've made this complicated." "Wolf knows, the medics know. Killing me doesn't fix this." "No, but it buys time. Time to get my story straight. Time to make this look like you poisoned the colonel. You, the disgraced SEAL with a history of violence. You who killed his own teammate." No one will question it. Merrick raised the gun. Put down the canister. Or what you'll shoot in an enclosed space with a canister of X-17 that will rupture and kill us both. Brennan laughed. You're not that stupid, Ravenshaw. Neither am I. Why did you do it? Why help Crane? Because he was right. X-17 shouldn't exist. Shouldn't be weaponized. I've served for 20 years, and I've seen what happens when we build things like this. We tell ourselves it's for defense, for deterrence, but we always use them. Always. And I won't be part of that. So you killed 3 innocent people. I killed 3 weapons developers who knew exactly what they were building. There's a difference. Not to their families. Brennan's hand tightened on the canister. Last chance, Ravenshaw. Walk away. Tell them you lost me in the corridors. Tell them whatever you want, but walk away. Merrick thought about Garrett Kane, about Nicaragua, about the split second when everything changed. But this time was different. This time he knew exactly who stood in front of him. He lowered the gun. Brennan's eyes widened in surprise. Smart choice. I'm not walking away, Merrick said, but I'm not shooting you either. Because you're right, we'd both die, and I've got promises to keep. He dropped the gun, kicked it behind him out of reach. What are you doing? Brennan asked. Giving you a choice. Put down the canister. Come with me. Face trial. Or open it and kill us both. Your call, Major. They stared at each other across 6 feet of concrete floor. 2 men who'd both served. Both killed. Both tried to do what they thought was right. Brennan looked at the canister in his hand. At Merrick, standing unarmed in front of him. You really would die here, Brennan said softly, just to stop me from escaping. I've already died once, Merrick said, in Nicaragua. This would just make it official. Behind them, footsteps, voices. The MPs were coming, drawn by the alarm, by reports of Wolf's poisoning, by the manhunt that must be spreading through the base, like fire through dry timber. Brennan heard them too. His jaw clenched. His hand trembled. He set down the canister. I'm sorry, he said, about your friend, about Garrett Kane. Crane told me what happened, about the jungle, the mistake. I'm sorry you've had to carry that. We all carry something, Merrick said. The trick is not letting it make us into monsters. The MPs burst through the door, 4 of them weapons drawn, shouting orders. They grabbed Brennan, forced him to the ground, cuffed his hands behind his back. One of them picked up the X-17 canister with shaking hands. Another approached Merrick. Sir, are you injured? No, but Colonel Wolf needs immediate medical attention. Brennan poisoned him. Check the coffee on his desk. The Colonel's in surgery, sir. They're doing everything they can. Merrick nodded, felt the adrenaline draining away, leaving behind the familiar emptiness. Another mission completed. Another day survived. Another night of not sleeping because the memories wouldn't stop. He watched them drag Brennan away. The Major didn't resist, didn't fight, just walked like a man who'd been expecting this moment for a long time and was almost relieved it had finally arrived. Captain Victoria Blackwood appeared in the doorway. She looked at Merrick, at the canister of X-17, at the gun on the floor. Well, she said, I suppose that answers the question about whether Crane had help. It answers more than that, Merrick said. It proves there's something wrong with X-17, something bad enough that 2 decorated soldiers would rather commit treason than let it continue. Or it proves 2 men had a crisis of conscience and made a terrible choice. You don't believe that? What I believe doesn't matter, Ravenshaw. What matters is what we can prove. And right now, all we can prove is that Crane and Brennan acted together to sabotage the project. And the emails, the ones showing Whitmore and Chen were developing offensive applications, classified, above your pay grade. Merrick stepped closer. 3 people are dead. Wolf might die too. You don't get to classify that away. Blackwood met his eyes. Watch me. She turned and walked away, heels clicking on the concrete floor, leaving Merrick alone in the mechanical corridor with the MPS and the X-17 canister and the certain knowledge that this wasn't over. Not even close. Colonel Harrison Wolf didn't die. For 3 days, he lay in the intensive care unit while the doctors pumped his stomach and filtered his blood and tried to reverse whatever Brennan had put in his coffee. They wouldn't tell Merrick what the poison was. Classified, they said. Need to know. But Merrick had seen enough chemical casualties to read the signs. Organ failure, neurological damage. The kind of toxin that killed slowly and painfully unless you caught it early. They'd caught it early, barely. On the 4th day, Wolf opened his eyes. Merrick was sitting in the chair beside the bed when it happened. You look terrible, Wolf said. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. You're one to talk, sir. How long was I out? 3 days. Doctors say you're lucky to be alive. Don't feel lucky. Wolf tried to sit up, grimaced, fell back against the pillows. What happened after the coffee? I remember your face. Then nothing. Brennan tried to run. I stopped him. He's in custody. What's he saying? Merrick set down the tablet he'd been reading, that he and Crane acted alone, that they did it to prevent X-17 from being weaponized for offensive use. You believe him? No, sir, I think he's protecting someone. Wolf closed his eyes. Victoria Blackwood. You know, I suspected the way she showed up so fast after the leak, the way she's been running interference, the way she keeps trying to classify everything before we can investigate it properly. He coughed a wet, rattling sound. I'm fine, just poisoned. Happens to everyone eventually. A nurse entered, checked Wolf's vitals, gave Merrick a look that said visiting hours were over. Merrick stood, but Wolf grabbed his wrist. The 48 hours I gave you, Wolf said, they're almost up. What are you going to do, Pawn? Find the truth, whatever it costs. Garrett Kane wouldn't want you throwing your life away on a suicide mission. Garrett Kane is dead because I made a mistake. 3 scientists are dead because someone made a choice. There's a difference, and I intend to make sure everyone understands it. He left Wolf in the hospital bed, walked back out into the mountain. The base had changed in the 3 days since Brennan's arrest. Locked down tight, MPS at every checkpoint, security badges scanned and verified at every door. Merrick made his way to the deepest section, level 5, where Dr. Elias Frost's lab was hidden in the mountain's guts. Frost looked up when Merrick entered. The old man was 70, white hair, wild glasses thick. He'd been working on chemical weapons since before Merrick was born. Mr. Ravenshaw, Frost said, I heard you caught our saboteurs. 2 of them. You think there are more? I know there are. Merrick closed the door behind him. Doctor, I need to ask you about X-17, about what it was designed to do. Frost set down the beaker he'd been holding. That's classified. 3 of your colleagues are dead. Wolf almost died. I'd say classification is secondary to survival. The old man was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed, walked to his desk, pulled out a folder so worn the edges had gone soft. X-17 was never supposed to be a weapon, Frost said. It was supposed to be an antidote. Merrick blinked. Antidote to what? To Soviet nerve agents, VX, sarin. The Russians were developing compounds we couldn't counter. We created X-17 to neutralize them. It worked in rats, worked in monkeys. We thought we'd solve the problem. But, Frost opened the folder. Inside were lab results. But the compound had an unexpected property. In high concentrations, X-17 itself became toxic. Not immediately, gradually. It would accumulate in fatty tissue. 5 years after exposure, maybe 10, the subject would develop cancer, neurological disorders, organ failure. Merrick felt cold spreading through his chest. The gas I breathed, when I sealed the valve, how much did I absorb? Frost looked at him with something like pity. Trace amounts. Probably not enough to trigger the long-term effects. Probably. But you don't know. No one knows. And Whitmore and Chen were trying to weaponize this. No, Frost's voice hardened. They were trying to refine it, to remove the delayed toxicity. But someone in the Pentagon saw the offensive potential, saw that a weapon with a 5-year fuse could be deniable, untraceable, perfect for asymmetric warfare. That's why they did it, Merrick said quietly. Crane and Brennan. Because they saw what we were becoming. They killed 3 people who were trying to fix it, Frost snapped. Whitmore and Chen weren't monsters. They understood the ethical implications. They were working to neutralize the delayed toxicity. Does Blackwood know that? Frost laughed bitterly. Captain Blackwood knows everything. She's reviewed every report, every equation, every test result. She knows the Pentagon wants a weapon, not an antidote. So she's protecting the program. She's protecting her career. X-17 is her project. Whitmore and Chen's research threatened that. Threatened to prove the whole thing was too dangerous to use. So Frost stopped. His eyes widened. She what? Merrick pressed. The old man's face crumpled. She ordered me to falsify the research. 3 months ago, told me to remove the data about delayed toxicity. I refused. She threatened to end the program, to fire everyone. But you didn't do it. No, I told Whitmore and Chen. We agreed we'd go public if we had to. Whistleblow. Contact Congress. Whatever it took to stop X-17 from being weaponized. And Blackwood found out. Frost nodded miserably. The leak happened 2 days after we made that decision. 2 days after we agreed to expose the truth. So Blackwood didn't just protect the program after the fact. She orchestrated the whole thing. I can't prove it, but the timing, it's too convenient to be coincidence. One more thing, Merrick said. Raymond Hale, the maintenance tech who disabled the camera. Where is he? Frost's face darkened. Dead. They found his body in the woods 3 days ago. Suicide, they're calling it. Single gunshot to the head. Blackwood. Can't prove it, but the timing. Frost shook his head. Hale was the loose end. He didn't know he was part of a murder conspiracy, just thought he was helping Crane with security upgrades. When he realized what happened, he probably panicked, threatened to talk. So she eliminated him. Like I said, can't prove it, but yeah. Merrick let go of Frost's shoulder, his mind raced connecting pieces. Blackwood wanted X-17 weaponized. The scientists threatened to expose the danger. So Blackwood found 2 men with the skills and the motivation, and she convinced them they were stopping a weapon. She gave them just enough truth to make them believe they were heroes. She used Hale without him knowing what he was really doing. Then she let them kill the scientists who threatened her project. And when Hale became a liability, she eliminated him too. I need proof, Merrick said. Documentation, emails, anything that connects Blackwood to Crane and Brennan. There's nothing. Everything was verbal, face-to-face meetings, no paper trail. Before Merrick left Frost's lab, the old man grabbed his arm. If you're going after her, Frost said quietly, you need to know something. I've been documenting everything. Recording conversations, building a backup file. If something happens to you, if she buries this, I have insurance. Why tell me this? Because you need to know you're not alone. And because if she gets to you before you get to her, Frost pulled out his phone, I'll make sure the truth gets out, one way or another. Merrick nodded. Be careful, doctor. She's already killed 4 people. A 5th won't slow her down. I'm 70 years old, Mr. Ravenshaw. Death doesn't scare me anymore. Silence does. Everyone leaves a trail. Merrick pulled out his phone, made a call. This is Ravenshaw, security consultant. I need access to all classified communications for the past 6 months, specifically anything involving Captain Victoria Blackwood. 3 minutes later, his tablet buzzed. The files arrived. He started reading while he walked. Most of it was bureaucratic noise, but buried in the routine, Merrick found the anomalies. 3 emails from Blackwood to Pentagon brass marked eyes only, dated 2 weeks before the leak. The first recent developments suggest primary research team may present obstacles to planned deployment timeline, recommend contingency measures. The second research team unwilling to proceed with offensive applications. Alternative personnel may be required. Request authorization to implement security protocols. The third sent 5 days before the leak, contingency measures approved. Implementation timeline 72 hours. All evidence will be sanitized. Merrick stopped walking. Blackwood had planned it, all of it. She'd gotten approval from the Pentagon to eliminate obstacles. She'd found Crane and Brennan and turned them into weapons. The leak wasn't terrorism. It was assassination. Sanctioned by the highest levels of the United States government. And Merrick had 20 minutes before his security clearance expired. He reached Building 2, the officers' quarters. Blackwood's room was at the end of the hall. He walked past it, turned the corner, found the maintenance access panel. Inside was a crawl space, 18 inches high, running the length of the building. Merrick dropped to his stomach, pulled himself forward with his elbows, counted doors, 1, 2, 3. Blackwood's quarters. He found the ventilation duct, unscrewed it from inside, lowered himself down. The quarters were Spartan, bed, desk, closet, no personal effects, except the desk. Merrick went to it, opened the drawers, found what he was looking for in the bottom right. A folder, unmarked. Inside were documents, handwritten notes, meeting records, and photographs, 3 of them. Dr. Alan Whitmore, Dr. Sarah Chen, Robert Hayes. Each photo had a red X through the face. Merrick's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, photographed every page, every note, every piece of evidence. The lights in the room flickered, not a power outage, a signal. Merrick spun toward the door just as it opened. Blackwood stood there, but she wasn't alone. 2 MPS flanked her, weapons drawn. Step away from the desk, Mr. Ravenshaw, she said calmly. Merrick's hand was still on his phone. The photographs uploaded, sent to where he'd configured the server to forward to Wolf's email. But Wolf was in ICU. The evidence is already out there, Merrick said. Is it? Blackwood stepped into the room. Sergeant Powell is very loyal to the agency. He sent your request directly to me, every file you accessed. I've been watching you build your case for the last hour. She gestured to the MPS. Escort Mr. Ravenshaw to detention. Charges unauthorized access, breaking and entering conspiracy to compromise national security. You killed 4 people, Merrick said. I protected a program worth more than 4 lives. The difference between us, Ravenshaw, is that I understand the math. You're still counting bodies. The MPS moved forward. Merrick's mind raced. No weapon, no backup, no way out except the window. He grabbed the desk lamp, hurled it at the glass. The reinforced pane cracked but didn't shatter. The MPs lunged. Merrick grabbed a chair, swung it like a bat. Blackwood drew her sidearm. Don't! Merrick didn't stop. He threw himself at the window, shoulder first. The crack widened. Pain exploded through his arm, but the glass gave way. He went through into the Montana night. 3 feet down. Snow cushioned his fall, but not enough. His shoulder screamed, possibly dislocated. He rolled, came up running. Alarms, searchlights, voices shouting coordinates. Merrick ran toward the darkness, toward the tree line 200 yards away. Gunshots, not at him. Warning shots, high. They didn't want him dead. They wanted him contained. Merrick kept running. The tree line loomed ahead. Darkness, cover. 50 yards, 30. Headlights blazed to life. A Jeep roared around the corner, cutting him off. MPS poured out. Merrick changed direction, sprinted toward the motor pool. Another Jeep, another squad. Trapped. Merrick stopped running, turned in a slow circle. MPS closing from 3 sides. Searchlights pinning him. Blackwood's voice echoed from a loudspeaker. Mr. Ravenshaw, you have nowhere to go. Put your hands on your head. Merrick looked at the mountain, at Ravenshaw Station carved into its flank. He thought about Garrett Kane, about Nicaragua, about mistakes and choices and the difference between them. He put his hands on his head, but he didn't kneel. I want Colonel Wolfe, Merrick shouted, and I want a lawyer, and I want every word of this recorded. Blackwood emerged from the shadows, gun lowered, almost smiling. Lawyers are for civilians, Mr. Ravenshaw. You're on a military installation, and as of right now, you're a threat to national security. She nodded to the MPs. Take him to the black cells. Solitary. No communication. The MPS moved in. Merrick didn't resist. As they cuffed his hands behind his back, he caught Blackwood's eye. You haven't won, he said quietly. Haven't I? She stepped closer. You have no evidence, no allies. Wolfe is dying. Your credibility is destroyed. And even if you talk, who's going to believe the janitor who killed his best friend? She turned to the MPs. Get him out of my sight. They dragged him toward the detention block. Merrick didn't fight, didn't speak. But as they pulled him into the mountain, he saw something that made him smile. Standing in the shadows near the medical building, watching everything, was Dr. Elias Frost. The old man held up a phone. Recording. The mountain swallowed Merrick whole, but the truth was already spreading, and this time no one could classify it away. 6 months later, Merrick Ravenshaw stood on the observation deck at Ravenshaw Station, watching the sun rise over the Montana Valley. The base looked different now, cleaner somehow, like a wound that had finally healed. Colonel Wolfe stood beside him, still moving slowly but alive. Recovered. The Senate hearings start next week, Wolfe said. They'll want you to testify. I know. Blackwood's lawyers will tear you apart. They'll bring up Nicaragua, Garrett Kane, everything. Let them. Why how? Merrick looked at the mountain. Because 3 people died here, and someone needs to make sure it meant something. Wolfe nodded. The X-17 program is being shut down. Pentagon orders. Frost's testimony sealed it. Good. They're offering you your rank back. Full reinstatement. Honorable discharge on record. Merrick was quiet for a long moment. What about Crane and Brennan? Reduced sentences. 20 years instead of life. The truth about what they were trying to stop. It mattered. To the judge. To the jury. And Blackwood. Facing trial, multiple counts. Murder, conspiracy, obstruction. She won't see daylight for 30 years. And Hale? The investigation confirmed it. Murder disguised as suicide. They're adding it to Blackwood's charges. Merrick turned from the railing. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes, but I don't want my rank back. Why not? Because I'm not that man anymore. Haven't been since Nicaragua. This just proved I can still do the job when it matters. But I don't need a uniform to do that. What will you do? Merrick looked at the valley, at the world beyond the mountain. Find another place that needs a janitor who knows how to smell death before it arrives. One more thing, Wolfe said. Your medical results came back. The X-17 exposure. Merrick's jaw tightened. And Frost ran the numbers. Your exposure was below the threshold. You're clean. Wolf paused. Probably. He says there's a 5% chance of complications in 10 years. But 5% is better than the alternative. Guess I got lucky. Third time now? Merrick smiled. Yeah, third time. Wolf smiled. The world needs more men like you, Ravenshaw. The world needs more men who are willing to stand up when everyone else looks away. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. 3 times now. Yeah, 3 times. They stood in silence, watching the sun climb higher, burning away the last of the night. Somewhere in the valley below, the world kept turning. Wars kept being fought. Secrets kept being buried. But in one small corner of Montana, 3 scientists could finally rest. Raymond Hale could finally rest. Merrick pulled out a worn photograph from his wallet. Garrett Kane, smiling, live, taken in Beirut, 1976, before Nicaragua, before the jungle, before the mistake that defined everything that came after. I kept my promise, brother, Merrick whispered, made it mean something. He tucked the photo away, turned from the railing. The ghost who'd spent 5 years trying to disappear had finally found something worth being visible for. Not redemption. You couldn't redeem the dead, but purpose. And for a man like Merrick Ravenshaw, purpose was enough. The truth was enough.